From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2335, this is Ham Nation Headlines for Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. Our top story this week takes us to the International Space Station.
The Russian space agency, Roscosmos, had announced that the nation's cosmonauts will no longer participate on any ISS flights after 2024. News of a possible broken partnership had observers questioning how the operation of the ISS would continue without Russia's participation. NASA officials said, however, that despite the July 26th announcement, the U.S. Space Agency had not yet received any formal declaration of intent from Russia. Cosmonauts have joined astronauts from many other nations as part of the team in orbit, conducting important research and making contacts through amateur radio on the International Space Station. The ISS was intended to stay operational until 2030. Roscosmos' new Director General, Yuri Borisov, said that Russia hopes to focus now on establishing an orbiting station of its own. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Paul Brown, WD9 GCO.
There's controversy in Brazil over proposed amateur regulations that include mandatory use of Logbook of the World for upgrades.
Brazil's National Amateur Radio Society, Liga de Amadores Brasileiros de Radiomissão, announced that the national regulator, Anatel, proposes that hams wishing to advance to a Class A or Class B license from a Class C would be required to confirm QSOs by using Logbook of the World. This proposal is designed as one component as an alternative being considered to replace the CW test. It's being called the Experience Test, and it mandates that LOTW be used to document contacts that prove the upgrade applicant has sufficient experience to warrant the change in license class. Separately, applicants would also have to fulfill the experience requirement by showing participation in courses and radio-related activities. The proposed use of the free online QSO authentication service has drawn some controversy. In an online statement, Labre claims that its use would constitute outsourcing to a foreign entity because the service is provided by the American Radio Relay League. Labre also believes this proposed mandate puts applicants at a disadvantage if they do not engage in contesting or DXing. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Jeremy Boot, G4NJH.
And finally, a story about not just a special event station, but a tribute to a father from his son.
Herb Goodluck, N7HG, grew up knowing that his father had served with the Marines during World War II, but that was all. Then in 1968, when the mission was declassified, he and his family first learned that John V. Goodluck was one of the famous Navajo code talkers who used their native language to craft a messaging system that defied decryption by the enemy. Herb gradually heard more and more stories of his father's efforts in the war's Pacific theater, enlarging his appreciation for their risks and contribution to winning the war. When his father died in 2000, Herb, who had earned his amateur radio license in 1996, wanted to do something special to honor him and preserve the legacy of all who had been a part of the Code Talkers. So in 2004, he reserved N7C as the call sign for the first annual special event to take place around August 14th, which is Navajo Code Talkers Day. 18 years later, this devoted son still honors the legacy of his father and his fellow code talkers. This year's special event will run from August 10th through the 14th. Additional information can be found in the QRZ.com listing for November 7 Charlie. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Randy Sly, W4XJ.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at arnewsline.org. With Paul Brown, WD9GCO, Jeremy Boot, G4NJH, Randy Sly, W4XJ, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe. I'm Don Wilbanks, AE5DW. 7-3. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation.